It's a bright Friday morning in June. Children are laughing, parents are rushing to drop off science fair projects, and teachers are preparing for another ordinary day at elementary school. By 8:45 a.m., everything seems perfectly normal. But in less than 2 hours, a 7-year-old boy will have vanished into thin air from inside his own school building. No screams, no witnesses, no trace. 14 years later, investigators still have no idea what happened to Kyron Horman. This is the story of America's most baffling school disappearance, a case so twisted that it would destroy a family, divide a community, and leave law enforcement grasping for answers they may never find. June 4, 2010 started like any other day for the Horman family in Portland, Oregon. 7-year-old Kyron Richard Horman woke up excited. Today was the science fair at Skyline Elementary School, and he had been working on his project about the red-eyed tree frog for weeks. Kyron was a bright, curious child with thick glasses and an infectious smile. He loved animals, especially frogs and salamanders. His teachers described him as intelligent and well-behaved. His project was colorful and detailed, complete with facts about Costa Rican rainforests and amphibian life cycles. That morning, his stepmother, Terri Horman, volunteered to take him to school. Terri had been married to Kyron's father, Kyron Horman, since 2007. She was actively involved in Kyron's life and frequently helped with school activities. At approximately 8 a.m., Terri loaded Kyron and his science fair project into her white Ford F-250 pickup truck. Also in the vehicle was her 18-month-old daughter Kyron's half-sister. The drive to Skyline Elementary took about 10 minutes. The school sits on a rural hillside in northwest Portland, surrounded by dense Oregon forest. It's the kind of small community school where everyone knows everyone and children are supposed to be safe. Terri and Kyron arrived at the school around 8:15 a.m. The science fair was set up in the gymnasium with dozens of colorful displays arranged on tables. Parents, students, and teachers moved through the exhibits, admiring the children's work. Security cameras captured Terri and Kyron walking through the school hallways that morning. In the footage, Kyron appears happy and excited, carrying his project. Terri is pushing baby Kiara in a stroller. They spent about 30 minutes at the science fair. Witnesses later reported seeing them together, looking at other students' projects and talking with teachers. Everything appeared completely normal. At approximately 8:45 a.m., according to Terri's account, she walked Kyron toward his second-grade classroom. She says she last saw him walking down the hallway toward his classroom door. She expected him to go inside for the start of the regular school day. This was the last time anyone admits to seeing Kyron Horman alive. Terri left the school with baby Kiara and drove away. She later told investigators she ran errands that morning, visiting local stores and driving around rural roads. She said she was trying to soothe Kiara, who had an ear infection. Meanwhile, inside Skyline Elementary, Kyron's second-grade teacher marked him absent when he didn't appear for first period. This wasn't unusual. Teachers sometimes assumed students who attended science fair activities might be running late or helping clean up displays. The school day continued normally. Kyron's desk sat empty, but no one raised immediate concerns. In small schools, attendance tracking can sometimes be informal, especially during special events. But here's where the story takes a chilling turn. At 3:30 p.m., school buses began their afternoon routes. Bus driver Susan Hall had been driving Kyron's route for years. She knew every child who belonged on her bus. When the bus pulled up to the Horman family's rural home on Northwest Sheltered Nook Road, Kyron wasn't aboard. Terri was waiting at the bus stop, expecting to see Kyron's smiling face behind the bus windows. Instead, she saw empty seats and confused expressions. The bus driver asked, "Where's Kyron?" Terri's heart began to race. "What do you mean? Isn't he on the bus?" "He never got on the bus," came the reply that would change everything. Panic set in immediately. Terri called the school, but the offices were closed. She tried reaching teachers and administrators on their cell phones. When she finally connected with school personnel, they confirmed the devastating news. Kyron had been marked absent all day. But how was this possible? Terri had personally walked him to his classroom that morning. She had seen him heading toward the door. Where could he have gone? By 4 p.m., Terri had called 911. Within minutes, Multnomah County Sheriff's deputies were racing toward Skyline Elementary School. The initial response was swift and massive. Sheriff Dan Staton immediately activated every available resource. Deputies, detectives, search and rescue teams, and volunteers began combing the school grounds. The school was locked down and thoroughly searched. Every classroom, every closet, every hiding spot where a frightened child might curl up. They checked bathrooms, storage areas, the gymnasium, and the library. Nothing. K-9 units arrived with specially trained dogs. The animals searched inside the building and around the extensive school grounds. The dogs showed some interest near the school's main entrance, but couldn't establish a clear trail. As darkness fell, the search expanded into the surrounding forest. Skyline Elementary is surrounded by thousands of acres of dense Pacific Northwest wilderness. If Kyron had wandered outside, he could be anywhere. Search teams used flashlights and thermal imaging equipment to scan the woods. Volunteers formed human chains, walking slowly through underbrush and calling Kyron's name. By midnight, over 100 people were involved in the search effort. Local media picked up the story, and Kyron's photo began appearing on television screens across Oregon. His image showed a sweet-faced boy with brown hair, thick glasses, and a gap-toothed smile. If you're finding this case as disturbing as I am, and you want to see how this mystery unfolds, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We're just getting started, and what investigators discovered next will shock you. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office quickly realized this wasn't a simple case of a lost child. 7-year-old boys don't just disappear from inside elementary schools during regular business hours. Detectives began reconstructing the timeline of that Friday morning. They interviewed every teacher, every parent volunteer, and every person who had been at the science fair. The school's security system became crucial evidence. Skyline Elementary had surveillance cameras, but not comprehensive coverage. The existing cameras showed Terri and Kyron entering the building that morning, but there were blind spots throughout the school. Investigators discovered that anyone could have entered or exited the school through multiple doors. During science fair activities, the building was bustling with parents and visitors. Security was relaxed, and doors that were normally locked remained open. This created a window of opportunity that would haunt investigators for years to come. The FBI joined the investigation on June 5th, just one day after Kyron's disappearance. Agent Tony Young was assigned as the lead federal investigator. The case was officially classified as a missing person investigation. But everyone involved suspected foul play. Search efforts continued around the clock. Hundreds of volunteers joined professional search and rescue teams. They used helicopters, horses, all-terrain vehicles, and ground teams to cover massive areas of Oregon wilderness. The community response was overwhelming. Parents from Kyron's school, neighbors, and complete strangers donated time and resources. Search command centers were established, and volunteers worked in shifts to maintain continuous coverage. But as days passed without any trace of Kyron, hope began to fade. The investigation team grew larger and more specialized. Detectives from multiple law enforcement agencies coordinated their efforts. Child psychologists were consulted to understand how a 7-year-old might behave in various scenarios. Every registered sex offender in the area was interviewed and investigated. Police checked alibis, examined phone records, and conducted background checks on anyone who had been near the school that morning. The media attention intensified. National news networks picked up the story, and Kyron's disappearance became front-page news across the country. As the investigation entered its second week, detectives began focusing on the people closest to Kyron. In missing child cases, statistics show that family members are involved in a significant percentage of disappearances. This statistical reality led investigators to take a harder look at Terri Horman. Initially, Terri appeared to be a cooperative witness. She provided detailed statements about her activities that morning and submitted to multiple interviews. She participated in search efforts and made public appeals for Kyron's safe return. But as detectives dug deeper into her timeline, inconsistencies began to emerge. Terri claimed she left the school around 8:45 a.m. after walking Kyron toward his classroom. She said she then drove to 2 different Fred Meyer stores with baby Kiara. After that, she drove on rural roads to help soothe Kiara's ear infection. Cell phone records told a different story. Detectives obtained Terri's phone data and discovered that her device had pinged cell towers in areas that didn't match her stated route. The phone evidence suggested she had been driving on Sauvie Island, a rural area northwest of Portland, for several hours that morning. When confronted with this evidence, Terri modified her story. She admitted to driving on Sauvie Island, but maintained she was simply trying to calm her fussy baby by taking a long drive. But investigators weren't satisfied with this explanation. Sauvie Island is a remote area with dense forests, rural roads, and limited cell phone coverage. If someone wanted to dispose of evidence or hide something, it would be an ideal location. The investigation took another disturbing turn when detectives learned about Terri's behavior in the months leading up to Kyron's disappearance. Friends and family members reported that Terri had been acting strangely. She had been posting unusual messages on social media and seemed increasingly isolated from her normal social circles. More shocking was the revelation that Terri had allegedly attempted to hire someone to kill her husband, Kyron Horman, just months before Kyron disappeared. According to investigators, Terri had approached a landscaper who worked on their property and asked him to kill Kyron. The landscaper, Rodolfo Sanchez, reported this conversation to police after Kyron's disappearance. When confronted with this allegation, Terri denied it completely. She claimed the landscaper was lying or had misunderstood their conversation. But the damage was done. The attempted murder-for-hire allegation shifted the entire investigation dynamic. Kyron Horman, Kyron's father, was devastated by these revelations. On June 28th, just 3 weeks after his son's disappearance, Kyron filed for divorce from Terri and requested a restraining order. In court documents, Kyron stated he believed Terri was involved in Kyron's disappearance and that he feared for his own safety and the safety of baby Kiara. The restraining order prohibited Terri from coming within 300 feet of Kyron. It also granted Kyron temporary custody of their daughter. This legal action effectively split the family apart during the most traumatic period of their lives. Terri hired prominent criminal defense attorney Stephen Howes, known for representing high-profile clients. From that point forward, she stopped cooperating with investigators and refused to participate in additional interviews. The silence was deafening. While Kyron's biological mother, Desiree Young, and father Kyron continued making public appeals for information, Terri retreated from public view. Law enforcement officials became increasingly frustrated. Sheriff Dan Staton publicly stated that Terri was not cooperating with the investigation and that her lack of cooperation was hindering efforts to find Kyron. The community began to turn against Terri. What had initially appeared to be a tragic family dealing with every parent's worst nightmare now looked like something much more sinister. Investigators conducted extensive searches of the Horman family property. They brought in specialized equipment to scan for buried remains and disturbed soil. Ground-penetrating radar was used to examine areas around the house and outbuildings. Nothing was found. The case began to consume enormous resources. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office assigned a dedicated task force to work exclusively on Kyron's disappearance. FBI agents remained involved, and the investigation file grew to thousands of pages. By the end of 2010, investigators had conducted over 4,000 interviews and followed up on more than 4,500 tips from the public. They had searched hundreds of locations and examined countless pieces of potential evidence. Still, Kyron remained missing. Years passed with no significant breaks in the case. The massive search efforts gradually scaled down, though law enforcement maintained that the investigation remained active. In 2012, Desiree Young, Kyron's biological mother, filed a civil lawsuit against Terri Horman. The lawsuit alleged that Terri was responsible for Kyron's disappearance and sought monetary damages. the civil case moved slowly through the courts. Terri's attorneys argued that she could not be compelled to testify in the civil case while criminal charges remained possible. The legal proceedings dragged on for years, adding another layer of complexity to an already convoluted situation. Meanwhile, the community continued to remember Kyron. His school held annual memorial events, and his image remained visible on billboards and missing person websites throughout Oregon. Desiree Young and Terri Horman worked tirelessly to keep Kyron's case in the public eye. They participated in media interviews, organized awareness events, and never stopped advocating for their son. But as the years stretched on, public attention inevitably began to fade. The case took a new turn in 2016 when investigators announced they were re-examining evidence using updated forensic techniques. Advanced DNA analysis and digital forensics had improved significantly since 2010. However, these new examinations did not produce any breakthrough evidence. In 2020, on the 10th anniversary of Kyron's disappearance, law enforcement held a press conference to update the public on the investigation's status. Sheriff Mike Reese confirmed that Kyron's case remained the sheriff's office's top priority. He announced that investigators had recently conducted additional searches and were still actively pursuing leads, but no arrests had been made and no definitive evidence had been uncovered. The most recent significant development occurred in 2022 when the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office confirmed that the case remained under active investigation. They stated that new evidence was being examined, though they declined to provide specific details. Today, Kyron Horman would be 21 years old. He would have graduated from high school and might be attending college or starting his career. Instead, his fate remains unknown. Terri Horman has never been formally charged with any crime related to Kyron's disappearance. She has maintained her innocence and continues to live quietly in Oregon. The investigation has cost taxpayers millions of dollars and consumed thousands of hours of law enforcement time. It remains one of Oregon's most expensive and extensive missing person cases. Despite all these efforts, fundamental questions remain unanswered. What happened to Kyron Horman between 8:45 a.m. and 10 a.m. on June 4, 2010? How does a 7-year-old boy vanish from inside an elementary school during regular hours? Was this a crime of opportunity committed by a stranger who happened to be at the school that morning? Or was it something more calculated and personal? The answers may never be known, but investigators haven't given up hope. Cold cases have been solved decades after the initial disappearance, sometimes through new technology or witnesses who finally decide to speak. Kyron's family continues to believe that someone, somewhere, knows what happened that Friday morning. They maintain that eventually, the truth will emerge. If this case has moved you, like it has moved me, please subscribe to stay updated on true crime cases like this one and hit that like button to help share Kyron's story. Someone watching this video might have the information that finally brings him home. The Multnomah County Sheriff's Office continues to encourage anyone with information about Kyron Horman's disappearance to come forward. Even small details that seemed unimportant at the time could prove crucial to solving this case. A reward of $50,000 remains available for information leading to Kyron's recovery. Until that day comes, Kyron Richard Horman remains frozen in time as a 7-year-old boy with thick glasses and a love for frogs who walked into his elementary school one June morning and never came home. His story serves as a haunting reminder that even in the safest places we can imagine, tragedy can strike without warning, leaving families shattered and communities forever changed. The search for Kyron Horman continues.